Cool. Okay. So yeah, maybe tell me the name of the farm,
Hmm.
your name,
Yeah,
a little bit of what you've been up to and the history of that.
sure,
And
sure. All right. So the name of the farm is Abundance Community Farm, and my name is Melanie Buffel. I'm the head farmer at the farm. And it's a bit of a unique model, I think. We are a community farm. We were born out of the ecstatic dance community in Vancouver. So this is kind of a collection of people who know each other already. Honestly, it's thousands of people in that community in Vancouver. So there was sort of a subset of people that had woven relationships together and wanted to find a place literally to ground, to be able to grow food together, to have a place to connect on a more consistent basis that wasn't sort of, in the city. It was a way to be out of the city and um, literally ground, and figuratively. So one of the members had a house in Dunbar, and that's a very kind of she part of the city. So he sold that house, and with the proceeds, he bought the farm. So unlike other sort of community projects that might form, it was really his energy that drove it in terms of the finances behind it, and it is owned by him.
okay.
So he purchased the farm in 2016, and I believe, yeah, it was 2016. Could be 2017. Don't quote me on that. I'd have to look back at it. Anyways, it was a number of years ago, and he invited, four friends to move out to the farm with him to kind of be the core group. We didn't have a concept of what it was really going to look like. It very much just developed organically. So what happened is our first year, we were out there too late really to do any farming. It was a former dairy farm. So there was a big dairy barn that had not been used for about 5 years. And there was about 20 acres of field that was just in hay. And there were two houses on the property and another smaller barn. So there was some potential there. But what to do with all that potential was the question. So the first season that we were on the farm fully was really 2017. So we opened up an acre of the hayfield and planted vegetables. None of us knew what we were doing. None of us were farmers. We were all, I was an urban homesteader, I'll call it that. I had like a plot of land and chickens that I was doing in the city, but nobody had really been actively farming. So I had this big crop plan, very intimidated by creating a crop plan for an acre's worth of land when I didn't know what I was doing. And then we realized, well, gee, we didn't start any starts in time. So now we just have to go to the store and buy what they have. So that was kind of our first year, was getting some transplants in the ground. But what we'd done is we had taken all of the manure that was underneath the barn and sort of slurried it up and brought it out and put it onto the field. And again, really didn't know what we were doing. So we did 5 applications of that. Yeah. And then we planted plants in it. So we had charred leaves that were like 6 feet long, and no weeds and no pests in our first year. So that gave me a very deep sense of security, very false sense of security. I thought this farming stuff is easy. We got this handled. And then, of course, we had some weeds grow. And what I've learned here this weekend is the amount of seeds those weeds produce. So, of course, second year was quite a bit different. And what we realized is that we weren't farming in a way that was going to make it sustainable for us, because people would just come when they wanted to. Lots of folks were really curious and interested about the farms. We had a lot of people around on the weekends, but it wasn't really a dedicated farm worker organization. So the next year, we really realized that we needed to spread people out. We couldn't have 40 people show up on one weekend and 2 people show up on another weekend. The farm needed constant attention. So that's when we created a structure. We call it the pod structure in our community agriculture program. So what it is there's pods in the city that are made up of 6 to 7 households. And each pod is geographically focused. So they're kind of in a neighborhood already in the city, easy for them to get to each other's houses easily. And we encourage them in the beginning of the year to have a potluck, get to know each other, and pull out their schedules and ensure that one member of their pod is at the farm every weekend from May through to October. So there's a pod representative. There's enough people in the pod structure that they can also see each other at the farm, because they overlap sometimes. But that's our labor force and our community that's guaranteed to come out to the farm on the weekends. So we start that in May. People come out. That's when we're transplanting, seeding, And then every weekend, we've got probably a minimum of 10 to 12 people. And we're wide open for anybody who's farm curious, wants to join us, to come and join us in the garden. So sometimes we have 40 people in the garden on the weekend. Once we get into harvest mode, then those people are also our distribution network. So they take the vegetables back into the city for their pod members, which is why we kind of kept it to 6 households, because we're asking them to take boxes of vegetables back in. So they need to have space in their cars to be able to drive that back in. The other ask we have is that people organize an activity over the summer, and that creates more opportunity for community and relationship to build. So after we're gardening or farming together all Saturday, then we have a potluck on Saturday nights. Every Saturday night from May to October is a potluck at my house. And then music, dancing, telling stories around the fire, arts and crafts, and we have different projects going around. We have a mural project happening on the side of the barn. We've had 2 documentaries made from filmmakers in our community. We have people, trying out their first yoga class, people doing DJ sets for the first time. It's a safe place for people to offer activities and kind of get their facilitation chops on things. And so there's always lots of activity. And we've had people with us now for 7 years. So there's lots of depth of community as well. On the farming side, a couple of years ago, my mom was ill, and I knew I wasn't going to be at the farm as much, that I needed to be back in Edmonton to support her. And so I formed a garden committee of people that were super keen on the garden. And I started with them in January, and we did the planning process together. We did our seed orders. They came out on weekends starting in February to seed in the greenhouse with me. And that was a big relief for me, just from previous years of, having a full-time job and seeding in the greenhouse as well, and just keeping all the plant babies happy. And so that was really, really lovely to have that accompaniment. And then when the season hit, we were organized into garden hosts. So each weekend there was a member of the community that would be a garden host, and they would come out early. I would go through task lists with them and provide instruction, and in some cases little videos. And we have lots of infographics around the farm to try to support people to understand what it is they're doing, because it could be 100 people that go through the farm every month. So it's an opportunity for them to get their hands in the soil, and to learn about where their food comes from. So those garden hosts provide the support in the garden to kind of keep people organized. We spend probably a half day just doing projects and tasks, and then a half day harvesting. We try to get out of the garden by 4 o'clock in the afternoon so that there's an opportunity to swim in the river or go for a walk on the mountain. We're in a really beautiful location right off of the Stolo River, the Fraser River, in a little town called Agassiz. And it's traditional territory. It's a very special little spot that was shared by the First Nations in the area. It was called a Freedom Village, and it has to do with history of people coming down the river and landing there. And there was many different people from different nations. So there's the Seabird Island Nation, the Chiam Nation, the Squaw, the Kwakwaka'wakw. So it was an area right where our farm is now that had a village of probably 1,200 people in the late 1800s. There's nothing there now. The Chiam have moved across the river. Seabird Island is upriver, and the other 2 are downriver, closer to Chilliwack. So part of the work at the farm has been to decolonize ourselves. Lots of sort of allyship training and conversations around what does decolonization mean to us, what does reconciliation mean to us, and developing relationships with the local First Nations. So we've got they have an amazing healer in the Chiam Nation that we have a wonderful connection with now, and he comes to do plant medicine healing work at the farm. And then we also have a garden project that I did this past year at the Seabird Island Nation, and we're now working with the elders as well and hosting them at the farm. And so I think we've got lots of work to do in the future just to continue to build those relationships. But it feels really amazing that we're cultivating vegetables, we're cultivating relationships, we're wanting to be good stewards of the land. It's Our model isn't about ownership. So the fact that one person owns the farm, I think he's a very unique individual. One of the most generous people I've ever met in my life. So for him, his ethic is about community. So yeah, the farm operates under a sociocracy model in terms of decision making. And yeah, so we have a lot of fun farming together. And I've been nerding out on the farming aspect for the last few years because I was new to this 7 years ago. So really understanding the soil science, understanding the regenerative practices of closing our loops. What does that look like? Looking at permaculture. We have a food forest that's about 1.5 acres, and how do we support those trees? It came up in a conversation I was having earlier, but a lot of us have like this desire to make things happen, but really also stepping back and letting nature, dictate the pace. So that's been a real big lesson at the farm, is that, we had a permaculture group, a workshop come like in our first year or two. We had just planted the food forest. It just looked like bare sticks in the ground. And I overheard people going, well, this isn't permaculture. And I thought, give it a few years. Come back and you'll see the guild plants and the 7 layers in the food forest, and that it doesn't look like a whole lot now, but we're literally planting seeds, and we have to wait for this to develop over time. So yeah, so the farm's constantly evolving.
Yeah, that's awesome, and as it should, right?
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like you've really created this kind of hub almost that you're starting to influence, the local community, which is that's beautiful. That's what it's all meant to be. You had mentioned you're going through and learning these principles of dealing with the soil and regenerative agriculture kind of techniques to close loops and stuff. Can you speak on any of the stuff, or
Sure.
what you've been learning, or how you've been learning, and
Well,
how you've been trying to implement?
as I said, we opened up a hayfield, and we knew we wanted to not till. There was something about the no-till approach that we really felt was probably how we were going to do the farm. We didn't want a lot of mechanization on the farm. We had lots of labor available, so we didn't want to use a lot of machines. So we thought, okay, well, we're going to go for the no-till route. But we have experimented with what that actually looks like in terms of how to keep the ground mulched properly, how to keep it covered, how to keep the soil fed with what it needs. So we've done the no-till since the beginning. We've done all kinds of mulching in terms of keeping the weeds down and feeding the soil. We're trying to use the hay from our own fields, or the straw from our own fields, to mulch the garden. We've gone through different iterations. One year I bought all of this landscape fabric, and I thought, this is going to be it. This is like 10-year fabric. We're going to put this down once. We're going to not have to do anything for 10 years. That lasted 1 year. The fabric did not last in some instances. It's not 10-year fabric. It might be, 6-month fabric. And just learning how it works and how it doesn't work. So, soil ending up on top of the fabric creates a real problem for pulling weeds now, because they're now rooted into the fabric as well. So we abandoned the fabric, and we had a local farmer who was an organic farmer that had 10 acres of weed-free fields come and give us a consult. And honestly, I was a little chagrined as the farmer he was coming to, because the weeds were as tall as your nose in some places, and you couldn't see the vegetables. And I said, Dan, help us. So he gave us a lot of good advice, and we took his advice, and it's really been working for us over the years. So we, the next year, we composted all of our beds with a good 6 inches of compost across the entire bed. And then we use our hay mulch as well, our straw mulch. And what we do now is we put compost, fairly thick bit of compost, after all the crops are taken out, and then we cover it with a good foot and a half of that straw, and that's how the garden looks over the winter. So that's what we're calling putting the beds to bed. So there's no bare soil anywhere. When we're ready to plant in the spring, we just pull back that straw onto the beds or into the paths, and it opens up the bed, and the beds are beautiful. They're perfect. There's lots of worms. There's lots of biological activity in there. And we plant directly into that. So we're essentially planting into the compost that we put in from the previous year. The soil there was very silty. We're right along the Stolo, the Fraser River. So there's many generations of, flooding in that area that have really fed the soil in that way. No issues with water. The water table is high. It's right there for us. We irrigate a bit, and there's lots of water for us to do that. So what happens then is once we've pulled across that straw, it creates a bit of a mat in the paths, and that's what we walk on. It's clear. Again, this is partly our people organizing. It's really hard to keep people off the garden beds. People and dogs and children and the many, many people who come through the farm. So it creates a really clear pathway for people to walk on. And then we're just trying to figure out how to keep our weeds down and our soil health up. So it's taken us a few years to dial in our composting strategy. Because we have a lot of food waste that comes out of the kitchen because a lot of people eat at the farm, so we want to be able to compost our food waste. We had a traditional 3-bin system. We're flipping the bins every while. The rats loved it. We not so much love the rats, so we got rid of that system this year, and we've moved to a bokashi composting system for our kitchen waste, and that's really about fermenting. It's not rotting it, it's fermenting it. So we ferment that, and this is our first go. This is our first kick at that can. So we're collecting them in the houses and then putting them into a large barrel that's in a heated room over the winter. And we expect to be able to use the extract from that to put back into the garden. Whatever's left over in terms of the material will go into the larger compost system that we have. And what we've been told is the rats won't like it because it's too acidic. So that's a good thing. But there's a lot of material that comes out of the garden as well. So we're really paying a lot of attention to our recipe in terms of layering things, how often we turn that compost, covering it for the winter, because of course I'm in close to Vancouver. So there's a lot of rain over the winter that can just leach everything away, and we want to be mindful of that. So yeah, just kind of dialing in our systems, peeking in other places where people are doing good work and trying to learn from them, and then just melding that with our system too, because of course we have, again, come back to that 100 people that are doing this farming together. So really understanding that we needed to put materials in piles and then layer it ourselves, that we couldn't ask people to figure out how to layer things properly in that moment. So just put the dry stuff there, put the green stuff there. We'll get back to it on, and do it all at once and do that layering. It's been an opportunity to educate our members, as they just throw their stuff in the green bin in the city and then they get it taken away. They don't really understand what happens necessarily in the composting process. How to keep our soil healthy. And we have a great organization in the BC, in the Lower Mainland. It's called SPEC, and they offer soil testing for free. So you can get your soil tested in the spring and the fall. They do a lot of work on compost, so they will kind of do a survey of everybody who's selling compost, and they'll do analysis on those composts. So you end up with a beautiful chart of everybody's compost and what's in it, and how biologically active it is, or what the nutrients are. And so that's a great piece of information to have. It's just kind of putting all those pieces together.
Government funded?
SPEC, Society for the Promotion of Ecological Conservation. So they're a nonprofit. Yeah, they're a nonprofit. Awesome. It is totally awesome. Yeah. So really finding out, what are those resources out there. And, as a new farmer, the learning curve is steep. And that's partly why I'm just so appreciative of working with the young agrarians, is because I'm a new farmer. I'm supporting new farmers in the work that I do. So I really feel like I'm in the right place learning alongside people. And lots of support for us.
Cool. Well, this has been awesome. And maybe we'll just finish on the farmer that you are now, finishing this year of 2023 to that farmer that put on those 5 rounds of manure in that beginning of season,
Yeah.
what would you tell yourself,
Yeah.
or just that new farmer that wanted to get started?
Yeah. I would say, just to go with the flow in a way, like really everything is a lesson. Everything is a lesson. Again, because of our model, there are quote unquote mistakes that are made because we don't know, or someone doesn't follow instructions. And it's all a lesson that I don't need to hang on to things so tightly, that there's always something new to learn. And it's like a spiral, as I get deeper into something, there's more to learn, more layers to learn, and more layers to learn. So I'm just looking forward to the journey to continue learning and growing food and growing community.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Boom. Love it.
Mic drop.